Ambassador Espinosa Cantelano, Ambassador Maya Espinosa, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the first one who is speaking English, and I think that's good so, because our foreign guests were speaking in German here. So, what to say after these two impressive speeches of the ambassadors, which I fully support. The outline for Lima given by the ambassador of Peru, and the most wise words of my hero from Cancun, Patricia Espinosa. Oh, that is the wrong one. So, I would like to give you a short overview of what we, the German government, want to do. Where do we stand politically? What do we want to get out of Lima? What are we doing at home? And what do we need to achieve in Paris? State Secretary Steinlein already mentioned some points. We think that the fundamentals to reaching a good deal are there. We have the latest report, fifth assessment report of the IPCC. The climate is changing. This is changing due to human influence. The threats are overwhelming for our social and economic development, but our common threshold goal is still achievable, and it is rather cheap if we all work together. Second, we have engagement at the highest political level. For the first time since Copenhagen, about 120 heads of state and government joined hands in New York at the UNSG's Climate Summit a year before the final deal is to be done, so that they can be helping shaping the deal while not having the obligation to negotiate fine print. Thirdly, while years ago there's always been the impression that environment and economy are fighting, we're getting more and more evidence, more and more people who are convinced that sound environmental policies, sound climate change policies are the basis for a good social and economic development. And the recent study of the new climate economy shows a lot of examples. $90 trillion will be invested in new infrastructure in the field of agriculture, energy, cities. We can get them into the right direction, or the wrong direction. It's not cost, it's investment opportunities which need to be ripe the right way. And more perceive wrong decisions to be a risk to their economic development. Climate risk is factored in two respects. Wrong investments could lead to stranded assets economically. Wrong decisions, building in wrong places, could undermine investment if infrastructure is not taking into account the changing climate. And we have increasing civil engagement. I just wanted to recall the people's marches all around the world, 400,000 people giving a strong voice in New York alone. So, what is my wish list for Lima? What is the German government's wish list for Lima? I will fully subscribe to what Ambassador Meyer has said. We want a Lima draft. We want a Lima draft which basically gives a shade of how the different elements are put into a balanced package, where some questions are resolved, where a structure and how to put the elements into the skeleton of a treaty becomes visible. It's only 1 year time, and therefore the call of Minister Pulgar Vidal is right, that that is the first and decisive outcome. The second one is something which is seen from some as rather technical, a decision on intended nationally determined contributions, so what countries put on the table. But if we do not know what the scope is, if we do not know what the target year or years are, if we do not know what information could be put forward, if we do not know that a ton has to be a ton, we cannot add up and look whether we achieve our ultimate objective, and we cannot do analysis between different contributions. Therefore, getting clarity, getting guidance, getting clear guidance is important to inform national processes, to put information forward the wrong way and get a feel of what you need to discuss and fight for at national levels. I will come back to that in a second. I'm very hopeful that the main partners will come forward with INDCs in time that assessment is possible. Let me tell, number 3 was starting, which is the EU, which holds roughly 11% of the emissions, with their decision at the European Council's heads of states. And just yesterday, 2 other heads of state followed. And what I'm saying is that these 3 blocks or countries who are responsible for more than half of the global greenhouse gas emissions have put their offer on the table, have said that they are committed to low-carbon development, have said that they want to have a treaty in Paris. While not everything is perfect yet, they have pledged openly of what they think is their fair contribution, and that is now to be assessed jointly in the international process. The third one, Ambassador Meyer was hinting at, is most important, and we started that work a few years ago, to think about what needs to be done now in order to be capable of really achieving our targets in the years 2020 to 2030. And therefore, we need to work on pre-2020 ambition. Both ambassadors called for the ratification of KP2. We are in the process of doing that. The draft law is in the German Bundestag, and we are committed to that and already have established the internal rules to follow up in the implementation of KP2. But secondly, we need to ripe ambition through front-runner coalitions which go beyond what we have formally agreed in international treaties. And fourth, and thank you, Patricia, for mentioning that we started the ball in the Petersburg Climate Dialogue. I think it is absolutely critical that we have a sound, a good pledging first plenishment of the GCF before Lima. And Germany not just started the ball rolling, but we take upon us to invite those who are in the position to do so to come to Berlin on the 20th of November to hold the final pledging conference for the first replenishment. I would like to thank Mexico, who has already given its support to the Green Climate Fund, and we hope that all others will follow the call which Patricia Espinosa just shouted in the room earlier on. And moreover, we are very much committed in the broader field to doing our fair share and mobilizing the famous 100 billion from a various range of sources, which is through bilateral, through multilateral, an important part in the GCF, but also from private investment. To be very clear, if we do not shift mainstream investment into the right direction, we do not win the battle. But having said that, there is no excuse using private money for stepping back on public money, because we need to lever private investment into the right direction. Yes, we are doing our homework. The EU decided to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40%. And it's not just that we gave a headline figure, but we said quite a lot on how we want to do that as well. There is scope to raise ambition. Two important qualifiers, at least, and domestic. So we could do more domestic if others are doing things as well. And there are at least two fields in my mind where we could do quite a lot more if we get mechanisms internationally. The one is international market mechanisms, and the second one is in the field of sustaining the lungs of our world, in the field of forestry REDD+. And just in New York, the German, the Norwegian, and the Peruvian government, for example, signed treaties that we want to work in this field in our next host country. We in Germany, and you all hear that, we are committed to reducing already by 2020 our greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. We know that current policies don't deliver on that yet, and that's why we will have a so-called climate and energy cabinet meeting of the whole government on 3 December, where we would like to put forward the measures needed to close the gap. And last but not least, it is important to create the political space for agreements in Lima and Paris by partnership initiatives, where we work concretely to helping countries formulating their INDCs, to get the infrastructure up and running, to build the capacities, to put forward ambitious, well-designed contributions. So, what is it what we think Paris needs to deliver on? A binding international agreement which sets out our post-2020 mitigation targets and robust rules for their implementation. And we, to be very clear, want joint rules, common rules. A ton must be a ton. We want to have transparency. The system, the hybrid system between bottom-up and top-down requires clarity, that science, think tanks, and the public can judge countries and compare countries' efforts, and to give you an opportunity to see whether we are delivering on a plausible way towards reaching our ultimate objective. It is important, as Patricia Espinosa said, all countries, being small, being big, need to deliver. I think that's an important political signal, while respected that our obligations are differentiated and that our capabilities are designing of what we are able to do. Also, there's always a lot of talk about mitigation. And mitigation is the basis that we are capable to adapt. And therefore, when I go to the small island states, they say, yes, we have to mitigate. Because only that gives us the moral, the legal, the convincing power that those who are really responsible act. But having said that, mitigation is just one part of the Durban mandate, and we are committed to deliver on all 6 pillars, which means mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology transparency, and capacity building. We know that international negotiations will only lead to success if it is a deal which is perceived to be fair from all sides. And again, Patricia Espinosa was highlighting that point. The lens of the most vulnerable must be at the center of our negotiations. We all know that in Paris there will be a gap. We will not deliver what science asks us to do in the first round. And therefore, architecture is that pivotal. Architecture where we are obliged to review our own pledges, contributions, commitments regularly. Every 5 years is our proposal, so that we get a rolling system of upgrading ambition. We want to have, and probably that's bridge building between negotiations and real life, we want to have a framework for pre-2020 ambition action, and we want that to be prolonged for after 2030. It is that those who do more, cities for example, those who engage in initiatives like Track Zero, they are committing themselves to be climate neutral, that they get recognition in a platform, and they get a platform where they can exchange and show that what they are doing is not just morally right, but is a successful business model. And both ambassadors were saying we need to implement rapidly the existing institutional framework in the field of the Warsaw loss and damage mechanisms, the adaptation decisions we have taken in the Nairobi framework was mentioned, that we do not need to reinvent. We need to reinvigorate and speed up these mechanisms. And in the end, we are negotiators, we are diplomats. In the end, the real world will make the difference, and therefore the signal needs to be clear. Can we do it? Yes, we can do it. Thank you very much, and if there are any questions, more than open. Thank you very much.